Richard Wayne Van Dyke was born on December 13, 1925, in West Plains, Missouri. He is an American actor, comedian, singer, dancer, and writer whose career has stretched across more than 7 decades. He is the man behind The Dick Van Dyke Show, Mary Poppins, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, Bye Bye Birdie, and Diagnosis, Murder. A body of work that has made him one of the most beloved entertainers in American history. Wikipedia. But reaching the age of 100 comes with a heavy price. One by one, nearly everyone he laughed with, created with, and loved has departed, leaving Van Dyke as one of the last surviving members of a golden era of Hollywood. Every single one of my dearest lifelong friends is gone, which feels just as lonely as it sounds, Van Dyke wrote in his book 100 Rules for Living to 100, An Optimist's Guide to a Happy Life. Carl Reiner was a revered and versatile comedy entertainer who won 9 Emmys and stayed active into the 1990s with roles in movies such as the Ocean's 11 franchise. For many Americans, he was perhaps best known for the 1960s TV sitcom The Dick Van Dyke Show, which he created and performed in as an irascible comedian. Malay Mail. During the 1950s, Reiner wrote and performed on Sid Caesar's popular TV variety programs Your Show of Shows and Caesar's Hour. During that time, he worked alongside other comedy writers who would also go on to have great success in the business, including Mel Brooks, Neil Simon, Larry Gelbart, and Woody Allen. When Carl Reiner cast Dick Van Dyke in his original series, The Dick Van Dyke Show, the two men became quick pals, and it was a friendship that lasted long after the show had ended. MeTV. Dick Van Dyke paid tribute to Reiner, calling him his idol and saying he had a deeper understanding of the human condition. TMZ. The friendship went beyond professional admiration. In his later years, Van Dyke had a ritual of calling Reiner every time he came across an old Dick Van Dyke Show rerun, a small, cherished habit that connected them across decades. Even Mel Brooks and Van Dyke good-naturedly argued over who was Reiner's true best friend. I always thought Carl was my best friend, Brooks recalled, and every time Dick would say, "No, I think he's my best friend." And if you ask Carl, it was the one who called him. We both loved Carl Reiner an awful lot. Carl Reiner passed away on Monday night at age 98, confirmed dead at his home in Beverly Hills, California from natural causes. Fox News. Mel Brooks issued a statement. Carl was a giant, unmatched in his contributions to entertainment. I met him in 1950 when he joined Sid Caesar on Your Show of Shows, and we've been best friends ever since. I loved him. Fox News. For Van Dyke, the loss was deeply personal. In his 2023 CBS Sunday Morning interview, he still could barely process it. Yes, my two favorite human beings, Van Dyke said of Reiner and Lear. Both gone, yeah. I can't believe it. Who was Norman Lear? Norman Lear was one of the most influential television producers in American history, creator of All in the Family, The Jeffersons, Good Times, Maude, One Day at a Time, and dozens more shows that reshaped how America saw itself on screen. He was a social warrior who used comedy as a political weapon, and he remained sharply creative and publicly active well into his late 90s. His bond with Van Dyke. The relationship between Lear and Van Dyke was one of the great friendships in Hollywood history, built on decades of dinners, shared values, mutual admiration, and regular laughter. In 2017, at a screening of HBO documentary If You're Not in the Obit, Eat Breakfast, Lear credited his friendships with Van Dyke, Carl Reiner, and Mel Brooks with literally lengthening his life through the power of laughter. CNN. At age 91, Van Dyke said of Lear, Norman has put me in movies and specials. These two guys. Without them, I don't know where I'd be today. CBS News. His death and Van Dyke's grief. Norman Lear died at the age of 101, prompting a massive outpouring of tributes from across Hollywood. CBS News. For Van Dyke, it was the second blow in just 3 years, first losing Carl and now Norman. Both gone, yeah. I can't believe it, he said simply in his 2023 CBS Sunday Morning interview, visibly overcome. CBS News. Everybody I knew and worked with. There's no one left, Van Dyke said. Rob Reiner is one of America's most celebrated film directors. The Man Behind When Harry Met Sally, A Few Good Men, Stand By Me, The Princess Bride, and Misery. He was the son of Dick Van Dyke's closest friend, Carl Reiner. Michelle Singer Reiner was his wife and longtime creative partner. The family connection. The Reiner family and Dick Van Dyke were intertwined across 3 generations. It was Carl Reiner who created the Dick Van Dyke Show in 1961, forging a bond between the 2 families that would last a lifetime. AOL. According to Van Dyke's wife Arlene Silver, Rob met Van Dyke when Rob was still a teenager through his father's work. Silver recalled, "Rob and Carl were the first people I ever met with Dick. Rob and Michelle were always together, like Dick and I. And I always felt part of the Reiner family. They always treated me like part of their family." AOL. The murders, one day after Van Dyke's 100th birthday. What happened next is one of the most shocking and heartbreaking chapters in this story. Rob and Michelle Reiner's bodies were found by their daughter Romy in their Los Angeles home on December 14, 2025, just one day after Dick Van Dyke's 100th birthday celebration. AOL. The couple had been stabbed to death. Their daughter Romy immediately told police that her troubled older brother Nick, 32, should be a suspect because he is dangerous. Nick was arrested by police approximately 6 hours after the bodies were discovered. The mix. Rob and Michelle's son Nick was charged with first-degree murder with a special allegation that he used a knife. If convicted, he faces a maximum sentence of life in prison without parole or the death penalty. AOL. Van Dyke's devastation. The timing was almost unbearably cruel. The day before, Van Dyke had celebrated his 100th birthday surrounded by friends and loved ones in a joyful, emotional celebration. Then came the news. Silver said Van Dyke didn't sleep after learning of the murders, choosing to stay up through the night waiting for more information. "We didn't know what happened. It just said the first reports are 2 people found in the house," she explained. AOL. Silver described it as a weird, wonderful, awful weekend, saying Van Dyke's birthday had been so amazing, so over-the-top beautiful, and then suddenly this. AOL. "I can't imagine if Norman Lear and Carl were alive for this," Silver lamented, referencing Rob's father and the all-in-the-family creator who had both already died. AOL. Fans and media alike noted the eerie, deeply emotional connection. Rob Reiner had died just one day after Dick Van Dyke's 100th birthday. Rob's father Carl had created the Dick Van Dyke Show, starring Van Dyke as a character named Rob Petrie. Ed Asner was one of the most decorated actors in television history, a 7-time Emmy winner best known for playing the gruff but lovable Lou Grant on The Mary Tyler Moore Show and its spin-off Lou Grant. He was also known for his political activism and his role as Carl Fredricksen in Pixar's Up. His bond with Van Dyke. Van Dyke and Asner were longtime colleagues and friends, part of the same generation of television giants who had shaped American sitcoms. Their bond had a particularly poignant final chapter, a dream project that was never meant to be. Van Dyke revealed at a fan event in May 2025 that he and Asner had been set to collaborate on a remake of the classic comedy, The Odd Couple. Asner died in August 2021 at the age of 91 before the project could move forward. AOL. That would have been such fun, and we lost it. "I've lost a lot of friends," Van Dyke said, visibly emotional. AOL. The unmade Odd Couple remake stands as a symbol of everything Van Dyke has been robbed of, not just by death, but by time. Michelle Triola Marvin was an American actress, lounge singer, and dancer who became widely known for suing actor Lee Marvin in 1977 after their relationship ended, a case that helped establish the legal concept of palimony. Wikipedia. A love story born from guilt. Dick Van Dyke and Michelle Triola began their relationship in 1975 and were together for 34 years until her death in 2009 from lung cancer. Soap Central. Van Dyke has been honest about how the relationship began. He was still married to his first wife, Margie Willett, at the time. In his memoir, he wrote about how he met Michelle while she was suing Lee Marvin. "She was easy to talk to. She understood me. I was drawn into a relationship. I was involved with a woman other than my wife. It was unbelievable. I was writhing in guilt. By 1976, I had to do something. I needed to be honest." Soap Central. 33 years together. Despite the complicated start, Van Dyke and Michelle built a deep, committed partnership over more than 3 decades. They were constant companions, at events, in private, through Van Dyke's various professional highs and personal battles with alcoholism. Though they never officially married, she was everything to him. "I was completely unprepared for life without Michelle," Van Dyke shared in his book, Remind magazine, her death and his recovery. After Michelle died from lung cancer in 2009, Arlene Silver, whom Van Dyke had first met backstage at the 2006 SAG Awards, would come by after work and bring me food. He later recalled, "She was such a support. I fell in love. AOL. The transition from grief to new love was slow and tender." Van Dyke and Arlene Silver married on February 29, 2012, Leap Day, in a ceremony he described as kinda on the spur of the moment. Margie Willett was Dick Van Dyke's first wife and the mother of his 4 children, Barry, Carrie, Christian, and Stacy. They married in 1948, young and in love, when Van Dyke was still just starting out as a radio comedian in Illinois. Their marriage was loving but turbulent. Van Dyke's alcoholism, long hours, and eventual affair with Michelle Triola slowly unraveled it. They separated in the late 1970s and officially divorced in 1984. His grief at her death. Though they had been divorced for over 2 decades by the time she died, Van Dyke was deeply affected. In 2007, Margie Willett was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. "I was deeply affected," Van Dyke wrote. "Even though we were long divorced, with her death I lost a part of myself." AOL. The sentiment speaks to the quiet, complicated grief that comes from losing someone who shaped your entire early life, someone who was there before the fame, before everything. Dick Van Dyke has now attended more funerals than most people can imagine. He has watched entire generations of colleagues and friends disappear. His wife Arlene Silver has put it plainly, he's outlived everybody. That's the curse of living to almost 100. AOL. And yet Van Dyke faces it with extraordinary grace. He has said publicly that he is not afraid of death, and that even though the thought crosses his mind, he doesn't let it frighten him. Though he adds with characteristic humor, "Although I'd like a lot more life." Yahoo! "I don't care how long the memory of me, Dick Van Dyke, lasts in the world after I'm gone. I care about the survival of what I've shared with the world. Humor, compassion, a zest for living, a love of music," he told Al Roker on the Today Show. AOL. What matters most to him is that future generations of children keep singing along to Mary Poppins. For as long as children are proudly belting out their new word, supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, or singing and skipping along to Chim Chim Cheree, the most important part of me will always be alive, he said. AOL. At 100 years old, Dick Van Dyke is a living archive, not just of Hollywood's golden era, but of what it means to love, to grieve, and to keep going anyway.